I used to be the kind of person who would scroll endlessly through social media, watching influencers show off their new products, new businesses, and the luxurious lives they were living. I envied their success, but more than anything, I was terrified of failing. At 28, I was stuck in a routine job that barely paid enough to cover rent, let alone save for the future. I had always dreamed of starting a business, but the idea seemed too big, too impossible for someone like me. I was just another person going through the motions, day after day. One night, while scrolling through Instagram, I came across a post from someone who had built an entire business around a simple product: candles. But these weren't just any candles. They were uniquely designed, eco-friendly, and beautifully packaged. I remember thinking, if they can do this, why can't I? That moment sparked something in me. I couldn't shake the thought, so I started doing research on candle making, the market, and how people were turning small ideas into million-dollar businesses. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. I didn't have any experience with manufacturing or retail, but what I did have was determination. I spent the next few weeks watching YouTube tutorials, reading articles, and asking anyone I could for advice. I figured out that the candle market was not as saturated as I had thought, and there was room for creativity and innovation. But before I could get started, I had to deal with one major hurdle: money. I had a few $100s saved up, but not nearly enough to launch a full-fledged business. That's when I decided to go the crowdfunding route. I created a campaign on Kickstarter and made a pitch video about my vision for creating a line of luxury, eco-friendly candles with a twist. Instead of traditional scents like lavender or vanilla, I wanted to incorporate unique, natural ingredients that people would remember. Things like sandalwood, jasmine, and patchouli mixed with hints of exotic fruits and flowers. I also promised to donate a portion of the profits to environmental causes, which I hoped would resonate with potential backers. To my surprise, the Kickstarter campaign was a success. It wasn't a massive success, but I managed to raise enough money to cover the initial costs of materials, packaging, and branding. The next challenge was finding a manufacturer who could bring my vision to life. I didn't want to outsource to large factories overseas because I didn't want to compromise on quality. After weeks of searching, I found a small local workshop that specialized in handmade candles. It wasn't cheap, but I believed in the product and was willing to make the sacrifice. Once the first batch was ready, I faced another challenge: marketing. I had no experience in advertising or digital marketing. I was just a regular person with a dream, but I knew I had to get the word out. I started an Instagram page and posted pictures of the candles with beautifully crafted captions. I asked friends to share my posts, and I used hashtags like #smallbusiness, #candlemakers, and #luxurylifestyle to gain visibility. Slowly but surely, people started noticing. The first few months were rough. Sales were inconsistent, and I struggled to keep up with demand. I had to take on multiple part-time jobs just to pay for materials and keep the business afloat. But there was something magical about the process of creating these candles. When I saw someone post a photo of my product on Instagram, or when a customer sent me a message saying how much they loved the scent, I felt a sense of pride that kept me going. It wasn't about the money, it was about proving to myself that I could do something. By the time the 6-month mark came around, I had established a small but loyal customer base. It was enough for me to quit one of my part-time jobs and focus more on the business. I reinvested every penny back into the company, expanding the product line and upgrading the website. I started reaching out to influencers and bloggers, offering them free candles in exchange for a post. Some said yes, some said no, but those who did helped boost sales. Slowly, my social media following grew. The turning point came when a well-known lifestyle blogger posted about my candles. The traffic to my website skyrocketed, and within days, I had sold out of almost every product. I realized that this was my chance to take things to the next level. I rented a small studio space to keep up with demand and hired a couple of part-time workers to help with packing and shipping. But as the business grew, so did the challenges. Managing a growing team, balancing inventory, and keeping up with customer service became overwhelming. I was often working 18-hour days, barely sleeping, and struggling to maintain a work-life balance. I felt the pressure mounting, but I also knew that I couldn't afford to stop. In the third year of my business, I made a risky decision. I would invest in a branded store on Etsy and scale up my production. The added exposure was exactly what we needed to push the brand into new markets. At the same time, I began reaching out to potential retail partners, hoping to get our candles on store shelves. It wasn't easy. Many stores turned me down, but some gave me a shot. When our candles finally landed in a few local boutiques, it felt like a dream come true. The first time I saw my candles on a store's shelf was unforgettable. I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just the physical product that had made it. It was the years of struggle, hustle, and countless hours spent perfecting every detail. I had built this brand from the ground up, and it was starting to pay off. Today, my candle business is thriving. We have a full product line, including seasonal collections and limited edition releases, and we've expanded into bath products and home decor. We've gained a following of loyal customers, and the brand is now carried in stores across the country. I still remember the fear I felt when I first started, the doubts that gnawed at me every step of the way. But I've learned that success isn't about having everything figured out from the start. It's about showing up every day, learning from mistakes, and never giving up on your dreams. Starting a business wasn't easy, but it's been the most rewarding journey of my life. I still have a long way to go, and I continue to face challenges, but I've learned that those are just opportunities in disguise. If I could do it, anyone can. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I had always dreamed of starting my own business. But dreams are easy, right? It's the execution that's hard. And when you're stuck in a dead-end job, struggling to make ends meet and paying rent in a small apartment, those dreams can seem like nothing more than fairy tales. For years, I convinced myself that I was too young, not skilled enough, or simply not lucky enough to become an entrepreneur. But as they say, life has a funny way of pushing you when you least expect it. It all started in 2017. I was 25, working as a marketing assistant at a mediocre company. I wasn't doing badly, hell. I even had a steady paycheck, but I wasn't inspired. I found myself dreaming of something more. I wanted to create, to build something that I could be proud of. But I was always too afraid to take that first step. Then, one afternoon, it happened. I was at my desk, mindlessly scrolling through social media, when I came across a post from a college friend. She was now running a successful online business, selling handmade jewelry. She was doing it full-time, traveling the world, and living life on her own terms. That post struck me hard. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but seeing her success lit a fire in me. If she could do it, why couldn't I? I sat there staring at her post for a while, and something inside of me clicked. I realized that the only thing holding me back from doing something similar was myself. I had an idea for a business. I wanted to create a platform that helped people get fit and healthy without the overwhelming pressure of fitness trends or gimmicks. Something simple, relatable, and genuinely helpful. I had no idea where to start, but I decided that I was done waiting. I spent the next few months researching the fitness industry, reading books, listening to podcasts, and watching endless YouTube videos on entrepreneurship. I learned everything I could about building an online brand and understanding the basics of e-commerce. Slowly, I began to piece together a plan. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was something. I had a vision, and that vision was all I needed to get started. The hardest part was deciding when to quit my job. I had a steady income, and leaving that behind seemed terrifying. But one night, after another soul-sucking day at work, I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I hated every second of sitting in that cubicle, answering emails, and attending meetings that seemed like they led nowhere. I had to take a leap. I handed in my resignation the very next day, even though I had no idea how I would support myself. With my last paycheck in hand, I went to work building my business. I started by creating a website. I knew nothing about web design, but I found a user-friendly platform and spent sleepless nights learning how to make it look professional. I then spent weeks creating content, blog posts, workout guides, healthy recipes, and motivational articles. I made sure everything I created was simple and easy to follow. The fitness world was already flooded with complicated workout plans and unrealistic diets, and I wanted to offer something different. I wanted to create a space where people felt supported, not overwhelmed. After months of hustling, I finally launched my website. I had no budget for marketing, so I relied on word of mouth, social media, and a few collaborations with small influencers. The first few months were tough. I wasn't making any money. My friends and family were supportive, but they were also skeptical. "Are you sure this is going to work?" they'd ask. "Maybe you should go back to your stable job." But something kept me going. I started to see small wins, an email from someone who had completed a workout I posted and felt amazing afterward, or a comment on my blog from someone who said my article had changed their perspective on health. That's when I realized I wasn't just building a business, I was building a community. People were connecting with my content, and they were getting results. That was the fuel I needed to keep going. By the end of my first year, I had made a total of $500. It wasn't much, but it was proof that there was demand for what I was offering. I knew I had to keep pushing. The next step was scaling. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, upgrading my website, hiring a freelance graphic designer to help with branding, and creating my first paid online fitness program. The real turning point came when I created a free 30-day challenge. The challenge was simple: follow a workout routine and healthy eating plan for 30 days and share your progress on social media. The idea was to create a sense of accountability, and it took off like wildfire. People loved the idea of being part of something bigger than themselves, and the results were astounding. People were signing up in droves. It was the moment I realized that this wasn't just a hobby anymore. I had a real business on my hands. The growth was rapid after that. I expanded my offerings to include monthly membership programs, personalized coaching, and nutrition guides. I hired a small team to help me with customer service, content creation, and marketing. I also started working with companies in the wellness industry, offering affiliate products that aligned with my brand. Slowly, I started making enough to cover my living expenses and pay my team. But the road to success wasn't smooth. There were plenty of setbacks along the way. The most significant one came during the third year of my business. After investing heavily in advertising, I saw a dramatic dip in sales. My customer acquisition costs were higher than expected, and I wasn't seeing the return on investment that I had hoped for. I felt like I was losing everything. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, and I considered going back to a traditional job. But deep down, I knew I couldn't give up. I took a step back and reevaluated my strategy. I began focusing more on organic growth, building a community on social media, improving my email marketing, and nurturing my existing customers. I also simplified my offerings, cutting back on the programs that weren't resonating with my audience and focusing on the ones that truly worked. It was a slow process, but eventually my efforts paid off. Sales began to rise again, and the business became more stable. Now, 5 years later, my business has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. I'm not just a solo entrepreneur anymore. I have a team of 10 people, and I've expanded my product offerings to include everything from fitness equipment to personalized meal plans. I'm able to travel and work from anywhere, and I get to do what I love every day. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. There were so many moments when I thought about quitting, when the challenges seemed too big and the pressure was too much. But every step of the journey, every failure, and every success has shaped who I am today. If there's one thing I've learned through this whole process, it's that success doesn't come from avoiding failure, it comes from learning to embrace it. If you keep going, even when it seems impossible, you'll eventually find your way. I had always been the kind of person who was fascinated by the hustle, the grind, and the idea of building something from the ground up. But I didn't come from money, and I didn't have connections. All I had was a burning desire to prove that I could succeed. My story begins in my early 20s when I was working an average 9-to-5 job at a marketing agency in a small town. I was doing the typical routine, waking up, working, and going home to do it all over again. But something inside me clicked. I wasn't satisfied. I felt trapped, and I couldn't shake the idea that I was capable of more. I wanted to start a business, but I had no idea where to begin. One night, I was scrolling through Reddit, looking for inspiration, and I stumbled upon a post about someone starting a small online store selling custom t-shirts. They shared their struggles, successes, and the lessons they learned along the way. I thought, why not? Maybe I can try something like that. I had no experience in e-commerce, but I figured if it could do it, why couldn't I? I spent the next few weeks reading everything I could find about starting an online store. I watched YouTube videos, read blogs, and joined forums where entrepreneurs like me shared their journeys. I learned about print-on-demand services, online marketing, branding, and customer service. The idea of launching an online business seemed like a risk, but the more I researched, the more confident I became that it was something I could do. With barely any savings, I took the plunge and invested a couple of $100s into starting my website. I used Shopify, a popular e-commerce platform, and found a print-on-demand provider to handle the production and shipping of my products. I decided to sell t-shirts with quirky, original designs based on pop culture and trending topics. My plan was simple: create designs that would resonate with a specific group of people and target them on social media. The first few months were rough. I spent countless hours designing, setting up my website, and tweaking my marketing strategy, but I barely made any sales. My friends and family were supportive, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. They didn't believe it would work, and honestly, I was starting to doubt myself too. But I didn't give up. Instead of sinking into frustration, I focused on improving. I used the little feedback I got from customers to fine-tune my designs and my website. I researched my competitors and adjusted my pricing strategy. Then, I doubled down on social media advertising. I started experimenting with Facebook ads, Instagram posts, and influencer marketing. It wasn't an immediate success, but slowly, I began to see results. I started getting sales here and there, and each sale felt like a huge win. But it wasn't enough to quit my day job, and the stress of balancing both was overwhelming at times. After working 8 hours at the agency, I would come home, eat dinner, and dive straight into my business. The real breakthrough came when I ran a Facebook ad campaign targeting a very specific niche, a group of people who loved retro gaming. I designed a t-shirt with a design based on a popular 90s video game character. To my surprise, the ad took off, and I made my first big sale. It was a small victory, but it gave me the motivation to keep pushing. I started scaling my ads, experimenting with different designs and target audiences. The sales started coming in consistently, and I began to realize that this could actually work. I knew I was on to something when, in 1 month, I made more from my online store than I made from my full-time job. I felt a rush of excitement, but also a deep sense of responsibility. I couldn't afford to fail, not now. I took the risk and quit my job. That was one of the scariest decisions of my life. There was no turning back. From that point on, my entire focus was on growing my business. Over the next few years, I poured my heart and soul into the business. I learned everything from building a brand to dealing with customer complaints, managing inventory, and even handling taxes. As the business grew, I hired a small team to help with customer service, order fulfillment, and design work. I also expanded my product line to include hoodies, mugs, and posters. But the real game changer came when I decided to invest in creating my own custom merchandise. I wanted to stand out from the competition, so I started working with local manufacturers to produce limited edition, high-quality items. This move helped me build a more loyal customer base who valued the unique designs and exclusivity of the products. The next big challenge was scaling the business. I knew that in order to take it to the next level, I had to expand my reach beyond my own website. I launched on marketplaces like Etsy, Amazon, and even eBay. With each new platform, I learned new strategies and marketing techniques that helped me increase visibility and sales. At one point, my store was making 6 figures in revenue annually, and I realized that I had built something far bigger than I ever imagined. However, with success came new challenges. As my business grew, so did the competition. There were copycat sellers who were ripping off my designs, and managing customer expectations became increasingly difficult as the volume of orders skyrocketed. I also faced supply chain issues and the stress of managing a larger team. But instead of backing down, I adapted. I hired experienced managers to handle the logistics, invested in better software to track inventory, and worked closely with my manufacturers to streamline production. Fast forward to today, and I've grown my business into a multi-million-dollar brand. We have a team of over 50 people, and we sell products worldwide. I'm still heavily involved in the creative process, but now I focus more on the vision and long-term strategy. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I started with nothing but a few $100, a laptop, and an idea. It took countless sleepless nights, sacrifices, and a lot of trial and error to get to where I am, but it was worth it. I'm proud of the company we've built, and I'm even more proud of the fact that I never gave up. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It requires grit, resilience, and a willingness to keep going when things aren't going your way. But if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that if you're willing to put in the work and keep learning from your mistakes, success will follow. I may not have had a mentor, a large network, or a fancy degree, but I had the drive, and that's what made all the difference. So if you're thinking about starting a business, my advice is simple: start. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for the stars to align. Just start. You'll learn along the way, and every step will bring you closer to your goal. If I can do it, anyone can. I had always been a dreamer. Growing up in a middle-class family, I had big ideas but very few resources to make them happen. My parents were both hardworking but never had the opportunity to achieve much financially. They instilled in me the idea that education was the key to success, but deep down, I knew I wanted to build something of my own. After graduating from high school, I decided to pursue a business degree at university. I was optimistic and determined to make it big. However, life had other plans. My freshman year was full of distractions, and I found myself struggling to keep up. I wasn't sure why, but I just wasn't passionate about my studies. I realized that I didn't need a degree to become successful. I just needed the right idea and the drive to make it happen. It was in my sophomore year that I had the light bulb moment. I was working part-time at a coffee shop, and one day, a regular customer came in wearing a unique pair of shoes. They weren't just any shoes. They were custom-made with designs that you couldn't find anywhere else. I asked him where he bought them, and he told me that he had ordered them from a local shoemaker who did personalized designs. That moment sparked something in me. I had always been interested in fashion and creativity, and I saw an opportunity to blend those interests with business. I started researching the custom shoe market and quickly discovered that there was a growing demand for unique, personalized footwear. I realized that I could create a business that offered custom shoes, but with a twist. They would be eco-friendly, made from sustainable materials, and manufactured ethically. I called it Green Soul. I had no experience in shoe manufacturing, and I knew that starting a business from scratch would be a huge challenge. But I was determined. I spent countless hours researching sustainable materials, finding suppliers, and learning everything I could about shoe production. I also learned how to build a website, create an online store, and market my products. I was hustling, working late into the night after my shifts at the coffee shop. I started small, launching Green Soul with just a few designs that I had created myself. I posted them on social media and reached out to friends and family, asking them to help spread the word. Sales were slow at first, but I didn't get discouraged. I knew it would take time to build a brand and a customer base. What I didn't expect was the overwhelming support I received from people who loved the idea of sustainable fashion. As my brand gained traction, I decided to take a leap of faith and quit my part-time job. I focused all of my energy on Green Soul. The first few months were a roller coaster. There were moments when I thought I had made a huge mistake. My savings were dwindling, and I was barely making ends meet. I relied on my parents for financial support, which was incredibly humbling. But I kept pushing forward, working long hours and constantly learning. I also started networking with other entrepreneurs and reaching out to influencers in the sustainable fashion community to help promote my products. Then, something clicked. My sales started to pick up. Customers were posting photos of their custom shoes on social media, and I started receiving inquiries from influencers and bloggers who wanted to collaborate. I knew I had to capitalize on this momentum. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, improving my website, expanding my product line, and increasing my marketing efforts. By year 2, Green Soul was starting to gain real traction. I hired a small team to help with production and customer service, and we started expanding our reach beyond social media. We began attending trade shows, partnering with boutiques, and launching targeted advertising campaigns. The more customers I spoke to, the more I realized that there was a genuine demand for sustainable, custom-made products. But, as with all businesses, there were obstacles. One of the biggest challenges I faced was scaling production. I had started Green Soul by working with a small local manufacturer, but as demand grew, I had to find larger facilities that could meet the increased orders. This process was frustrating and time-consuming, as not all manufacturers adhered to the same standards of sustainability and ethics that I valued. It took months of searching and negotiating to find the right partners who aligned with my vision. Along the way, I faced several moments of doubt. The pressure to keep up with orders, manage a growing team, and meet customer expectations was overwhelming. There were times when I felt like I was failing, and the weight of responsibility was too much to bear. But I reminded myself why I started, to create something that was meaningful, sustainable, and impactful. I couldn't give up now. By the end of year 3, Green Soul had grown from a small side project to a full-fledged business. We had a loyal customer base, a growing team, and a product line that resonated with people who were passionate about sustainability. Our shoes were featured in several eco-friendly fashion magazines, and we had been recognized for our commitment to ethical manufacturing practices. The success of Green Soul also gave me the confidence to expand my business ventures. I had learned so much about building a brand, marketing, and managing a team, and I wanted to share that knowledge with others. I started offering consulting services to other small businesses, particularly in the fashion industry, to help them navigate the complexities of sustainable manufacturing and digital marketing. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. I started with nothing but a dream and a part-time job, and now I run a successful business that not only provides me with financial freedom, but also allows me to make a positive impact on the world. Green Soul isn't just a shoe brand. It's a movement. It's a reminder that you don't have to come from money or have the perfect education to build something meaningful. With passion, persistence, and a lot of hard work, anything is possible. The road wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to quit, but now I'm grateful for every obstacle I faced. They taught me valuable lessons about resilience, creativity, and the importance of staying true to my values. I'm proud of what I've built, and I'm excited to see where Green Soul goes next. For as long as I can remember, I had always wanted to own a business. Not in the sense that I wanted to be a big CEO of some multi-million-dollar company, but more in the way of creating something that would allow me to live on my terms. I wanted freedom, the freedom to wake up and decide what I was doing that day, the freedom to choose who I worked with, and most importantly, the freedom to make my own decisions without having to answer to anyone. The problem, of course, was that I had no idea what kind of business to start. I wasn't a tech guru or a marketing genius, and I didn't have a big network of people to help me get started. In fact, I was just an average guy working a regular 9-to-5 job in a cubicle, barely scraping by with bills and living paycheck to paycheck. I always knew I wanted more, but the idea of starting my own business seemed like something that only people with a lot of capital or a ton of experience could do. I was stuck in a constant cycle of self-doubt. But then something happened that changed everything. One day, during a particularly boring meeting at work, I found myself scrolling through Instagram, as we all do to pass the time. I came across a post from a friend of mine from college. She had started a small online store selling custom-designed t-shirts and accessories, and the business was growing. It wasn't huge, but she was making enough money to support herself and travel when she wanted to. I was immediately inspired. If she could do it, why couldn't I? That night, I lay in bed tossing and turning. The thought of starting my own business kept swirling in my head. But this time, instead of pushing the idea aside, I leaned into it. I knew I had to start somewhere. So, I did what I always do when I'm overwhelmed: research. I spent the next few weeks devouring every article, podcast, and YouTube video I could find on entrepreneurship. I learned about dropshipping, e-commerce, branding, and social media marketing. The more I learned, the more excited I became. It felt like a new world had opened up to me, a world where I could be in control. But the more I researched, the more I realized that dropshipping wasn't as easy as it seemed. I had heard horror stories from people who had tried it and failed. They'd gotten stuck with suppliers who couldn't deliver on time or with products that weren't of good quality. I didn't want to go down that path. I needed something different, something more sustainable. After some reflection, I realized I had a passion for fitness. I had been working out regularly for years, and it had transformed my life. Fitness had always been a huge part of my routine, and I noticed that there was a lot of confusion around what to eat, what workouts to do, and how to stay motivated. That's when it clicked. Why not start a fitness brand that helps people get fit and healthy through simple, no-nonsense workout plans and nutrition advice? With that idea in mind, I got to work. I started small, super small. I created an Instagram page, a website, and a few workout guides. I didn't have a large budget for marketing, so I focused on organic growth. I posted consistently, engaging with people in the fitness community and sharing my own personal fitness journey. Slowly, people started noticing. My followers began to grow, and I got messages from people thanking me for the tips and advice I shared. It was a slow start, but it felt good to know that I was helping people. By the end of the first 6 months, I had made just under $500. It wasn't much, but it was proof that the concept worked. People wanted what I was offering, and I was onto something. I kept reinvesting the little money I made into better content, a more professional website, and paid ads. I created more advanced workout programs and nutrition guides that I started selling on my site. I also offered a free 30-day workout challenge that gained a lot of traction. It wasn't long before I started seeing more significant sales come in, and the idea of this being a full-time gig became more and more realistic. But as my business grew, so did the challenges. I had to figure out how to balance everything. Working full-time at my 9-to-5 job managing the business, creating content, answering customer emails, and keeping up with my fitness goals. There were days when I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. It wasn't easy, and the hustle was real. But I was determined to keep going, no matter how many late nights I had to pull or how exhausted I felt. The real turning point came about a year into the business. By then, I had a solid following, and my products were selling consistently. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted more. I realized that if I wanted this business to truly succeed, I needed to expand my offerings. I needed to think bigger. So, I decided to launch a fitness coaching program. It wasn't something I had planned to do, but I felt that there was a real need for personalized guidance. I put out a call for people who wanted to work one-on-one with me, and to my surprise, I had an overwhelming response. I started working with clients, helping them with their workout routines, nutrition plans, and mindset. I learned a lot in the process about my clients, about myself, and about what it really takes to run a business. By the time I launched my coaching program, I had enough income coming in from my online store to quit my day job. I remember that moment so clearly, the day I walked into my boss's office and handed in my resignation letter. It was terrifying. Leaving the comfort and security of a 9-to-5 job for the unknown was one of the scariest decisions I've ever made. But it was also one of the best decisions I've ever made. The freedom to work on my own terms, to choose the clients I wanted to work with, and to build something I truly cared about was worth every risk. Fast forward to today, and my business has grown into something I'm incredibly proud of. I now have a full-time team that helps me with everything from customer support to social media management. My online store continues to do well, and my coaching program has expanded. I've even created an online community where people can connect, share their progress, and support each other. The best part? I'm living the dream I once thought was impossible. I get to do what I love every day, and I'm helping people change their lives along the way. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There were so many moments when I doubted myself, when I thought about giving up. But I learned that success doesn't come from avoiding failure. It comes from learning how to adapt, grow, and keep going, no matter the setbacks. If there's one thing I wish I knew back then, it's that the hardest part is always taking that first step. Once you do, the rest is just a matter of staying focused and putting in the work. I'm proof that anyone can start a business, no matter their background or experience. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about having the grit to keep pushing forward, even when the odds are against you. I was fresh out of college, bright-eyed, and ready to conquer the world. I had dreams bigger than I could even describe, fueled by the idea that one day I would have my own company. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I was determined to make it happen. At the time, my biggest aspiration was to start a business that would not only change my life but the lives of others. The only problem was that I had no idea where to start. It wasn't like I had a pile of money to work with. I came from a modest background, and while my parents were supportive, they didn't have much to offer beyond words of encouragement. But I wasn't discouraged. I had something better than money. I had the drive to make it happen. After a few months of bouncing around various ideas, I finally settled on the idea of creating a digital marketing agency. It was 2015, and I saw a massive opportunity in helping small businesses grow online. Everyone was moving to the internet, and I figured it would be easy to leverage my skills and help other entrepreneurs with their digital presence. I was good with computers, had a passion for social media, and knew the basics of web design. Seemed like a perfect match. But there was one glaring problem. I had no clients. I didn't know a single small business owner who could afford my services, let alone someone who was willing to take a risk on a college graduate with zero real-world experience. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I started small. I created a basic website for myself, which looked pretty amateur, but hey, it was something, and I started cold emailing local businesses. I offered my services for free, promising that I would work for them for a month, helping them boost their online presence in exchange for a testimonial. I figured if I could get a few good testimonials, that would give me the credibility to charge for my work later. I didn't have anything to lose, so why not? The first few months were rough. I got a lot of rejections, some polite, others not so much. But every now and then, I'd get a bite. I remember the first business that actually said yes. It was a small local coffee shop. The owner, a guy named Tim, had no clue about the internet and barely used social media. He was old school, but he was also willing to try something new. I worked hard on his project. I designed a basic website for him, set up his social media profiles, and even started running a few Facebook ads. I wasn't getting paid a cent, but it didn't matter. I was building my portfolio, and that was priceless. By the end of the month, Tim was thrilled with the results. His sales had increased, people were talking about him online, and he even started seeing new customers walk in who had found him through social media. Tim was so happy that he referred me to a few of his business friends, and soon enough, I had a steady stream of clients. I charged them a modest fee, just enough to cover my costs and make a small profit. But that small profit was more than I had ever made before. I felt like I was on the verge of something big. As my business grew, I ran into more challenges. At first, I was a one-person show, handling everything from marketing to design to customer service. But I quickly realized that I couldn't scale it that way. I had to hire help. I found a few freelancers to assist with specific tasks, like graphic design and copywriting, but it wasn't enough. I needed a team. I hired my first full-time employee, Jessica, who had a background in digital marketing and a great attitude. She was sharp, creative, and incredibly hardworking. Together, we took on more clients, worked longer hours, and refined our processes. But the more successful we became, the more I realized I had to change my mindset. I couldn't just be a freelancer anymore. I had to be a business owner. Around this time, I started investing in my own education. I devoured books on entrepreneurship, attended online courses, and joined business communities. The more I learned, the more I understood what it took to build a successful business. But with that knowledge came a sense of overwhelming responsibility. I wasn't just responsible for my success anymore. I was responsible for my employees' livelihoods as well. In 2018, we hit a major milestone. Our agency was doing well, and we had grown to a team of 10. Our clients were happy, we had a steady flow of new business, and I was finally able to take a salary that allowed me to live comfortably. But with growth came new challenges. The more clients we had, the more complex our projects became, and the harder it was to maintain a personal touch with each one. I realized that to keep growing, I needed to specialize. Instead of trying to be a one-stop shop for everything digital marketing, I chose to focus on what we did best, helping small businesses grow through social media. I revamped our entire strategy, streamlined our offerings, and positioned ourselves as experts in the field of social media marketing. It was a risky move, but it paid off. By 2020, our revenue had tripled, and we were working with some big-name clients. But just as things seemed to be going perfectly, the world was hit with the pandemic. The uncertainty was terrifying. Clients started pulling back, events were canceled, and marketing budgets were slashed across the board. It was a hard year, but we didn't quit. We adapted. We shifted to offering more online services, like virtual events and webinars, which were in high demand as businesses scrambled to move online. We leaned into our existing relationships with clients and made sure we were helping them navigate the chaos of the pandemic. The entire year was a grind, but we survived and even thrived. Now, in 2025, our agency is bigger than I ever imagined, and we have a diverse set of clients that range from local businesses to large corporations. I still remember the days when I was hustling for my first few clients, working late into the night on projects I wasn't getting paid for. But all of that work, all those late nights and countless failures, have brought me to where I am today. I've learned that the key to success is simple: consistency, resilience, and a willingness to learn from failure. There were times when I wanted to quit, times when it felt like everything was falling apart, but those moments were the ones that taught me the most. If I had given up during any of those tough times, I wouldn't be where I am now. I may not have had the most glamorous start, but I built something I'm proud of. I'm not done yet, though. There's still so much more to achieve, and I know that the journey is far from over. I'm just getting started. I started my journey with a simple idea that seemed too good to be true at the time. I was in my early 20s, working a mundane office job that drained me every day. The corporate world never felt like the right fit for me. I wanted something more, something that made me feel alive. I remember sitting at my desk one morning, staring at my computer screen, feeling like I was stuck in a loop. That's when the idea hit me. It was a thought I had brushed aside many times before, but now, something clicked. What if I could start my own business? But how? I had no formal business education, no significant savings, and honestly, not even a solid plan. All I had was a burning desire to escape the 9-to-5 grind and the willingness to take a risk. I spent the next few weeks obsessing over this idea. I researched everything, every business article, blog post, podcast, and YouTube video I could find. It became an obsession. I knew I had to start small, but that was the key, taking that first step. One afternoon, after about a month of deep diving into the business world, I came across something that sparked my interest: e-commerce. I had always loved shopping online, and I knew the industry was growing. The idea of running an online store without the overhead costs of a physical storefront seemed like a perfect way to get my feet wet. I thought, what do I have to lose? I didn't have much money, so I didn't want to jump in and commit to a large inventory. Instead, I decided to start with dropshipping. For those who aren't familiar, dropshipping is a business model where you sell products to customers without holding any inventory. When someone buys something from your store, you place an order with a third-party supplier, and they ship it directly to your customer. It sounded too easy to be true, but I was determined. I registered my business, set up a website, and started looking for suppliers. The hardest part, honestly, was picking a niche. I spent days thinking about what products I could sell. I wanted something unique, but also in demand. After some trial and error, I decided to focus on fitness products. I figured people would always care about health, and there was an abundance of trending items in the space. I created a simple online store using Shopify, added a few products, and launched it with almost no marketing budget. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and fear as I hit that publish button. I had no idea what would happen next. The first few weeks were brutal. No traffic, no sales. I spent hours tweaking the website, making sure everything looked perfect, and constantly updating my product descriptions. It felt like I was talking to myself in a vacuum. My family and friends supported me, but nobody was buying anything. But I wasn't going to quit. I started learning about Facebook ads and Instagram marketing. I didn't have much money, but I was willing to experiment. I created some basic ads and targeted people who were interested in fitness and healthy living. After a week of trial and error, I finally got my first sale. That feeling, seeing that order come through, was like nothing I had ever experienced. It was validation. My idea was working, even if on a tiny scale. That first sale gave me the confidence to keep going. I refined my ads, improved my website, and started working on SEO. Slowly but surely, my store began to gain traction. The sales weren't pouring in, but they were consistent. I made enough money to cover my expenses and reinvest in ads, which helped me grow. Then came the turning point. One day, after a long week of working on the business, I decided to try something new: influencer marketing. I didn't have the budget for top-tier influencers, so I reached out to micro-influencers in the fitness niche. These were people with 10,000 to 50,000 followers, far more affordable than the big names. I offered them a free product in exchange for a post about it. Surprisingly, many of them agreed, and I started getting a steady stream of orders from the influencers' followers. It was like a light bulb went off. That was the strategy that really started to scale my business. But with success came new challenges. As the orders grew, I quickly realized I was not prepared for the logistics side of things. Shipping delays, supplier issues, and customer complaints started to pile up. I had to learn how to handle these problems quickly or risk losing my customer base. I spent hours on the phone with suppliers, learning how to communicate effectively and ensure that my orders were processed smoothly. I hired a part-time assistant to help with customer service, and soon I was able to streamline my operations. But the hardest challenge of all came when my business hit a plateau. After a few months of steady growth, my sales began to slow down. I was no longer getting the easy wins I had before. It felt like I had hit a wall. I realized that in order to keep growing, I needed to find a way to differentiate myself from the competition. There were hundreds of other dropshipping stores out there selling similar products. What was going to make mine stand out? That's when I made the bold decision to pivot. I stopped dropshipping and started sourcing my own products directly from manufacturers. I branded my own line of fitness gear, with unique designs and high-quality materials. I also added a subscription box service, where customers could receive new fitness products every month. It was a huge risk, but I felt it was the only way to truly scale my business and create something sustainable. The transition wasn't easy. It took months to find the right manufacturers, design the products, and build a strong brand. But when I finally launched my own line, everything changed. My sales skyrocketed. Customers loved the unique products, and the subscription box model created a sense of loyalty and excitement around my brand. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. My business now generates 7 figures annually, and I'm no longer working from the confines of a cubicle. I've hired a team, expanded into new markets, and even started a blog to help aspiring entrepreneurs. I'm living the life I once only dreamed of. But the journey hasn't been easy. There were countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and failures along the way. There were times when I thought about giving up, but every small success kept me going. The key was persistence, learning from my mistakes, and constantly adapting. If I could give any advice to someone just starting out, it would be this: don't expect overnight success. Be prepared for the long haul. Start small, be willing to learn, and never stop improving. And most importantly, be persistent. If you keep going, even when it feels like nothing is working, you'll eventually break through. It might take longer than you expect, but the reward is worth it. Now, I'm living the life I always wanted. But I never forget where I came from. The long nights, the failed ideas, the frustration. That's what makes the success so sweet. So if you're out there, dreaming of something more, just remember, you're not alone. And if I can do it, so can you. I still remember the day I made my first sale. It wasn't anything big, but it felt monumental. I was 23 years old, fresh out of college, and trying to figure out what to do with my life. I had a degree in marketing, but deep down I knew that the corporate world wasn't for me. I didn't want to sit in an office and work for someone else for the rest of my life. I wanted freedom. I wanted to build something of my own. The idea came to me on a lazy afternoon. I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling through social media, and saw a post about personalized products. It was something simple, like custom phone cases, but I thought, why don't I do that but with a twist? I had always been passionate about fashion and art, and I realized there was a market for personalized clothing and accessories. I could start a business where people could create their own designs on everything from t-shirts to hats to bags. I spent the next few weeks researching the industry, learning everything I could about e-commerce, printing methods, and how to get started. I didn't have much money to begin with, so I started small, using my savings to buy a basic printer and a few blank items to test the process. I knew I had to learn the technical side of the business to make sure I could deliver high-quality products. So I spent countless hours watching YouTube tutorials and reading articles. The first few months were a blur. I worked out of my tiny apartment, juggling customer service, design work, and fulfillment. At the beginning, it was just me, a printer, and a dream. I posted my designs online, shared them on social media, and tried to get the word out as best as I could. Sales were slow at first, so slow that there were times when I seriously doubted myself. I was barely making enough to cover the cost of materials, and the stress of managing everything alone was overwhelming. But then, one day, something clicked. I had posted a photo of one of my custom-designed t-shirts on Instagram, and it went viral. I remember checking my phone and seeing the number of likes and shares skyrocket. People were tagging their friends, asking where they could buy one. That was when I knew I had something special. I didn't waste any time. I immediately took down my first batch of designs and started creating new ones, while also refining the website and making it more user-friendly. I also reached out to influencers in the fashion and lifestyle space, offering them free products in exchange for shoutouts. That's when the orders started rolling in. Fast forward a year, and I was officially running a full-fledged e-commerce business. I had hired a few employees to help with fulfillment and customer service, and I had expanded my product offerings. The business was growing fast, but with growth came new challenges. Scaling wasn't easy. I had to find reliable suppliers and manufacturers to keep up with demand. I also had to ensure that my designs were consistently fresh and relevant to my audience. The pressure was immense, but I loved it. The turning point for my business came when I realized I could no longer handle everything on my own. I needed to invest in marketing and bring in experts who could help elevate the brand. That's when I hired my first marketing manager. It was a huge leap for me because I had been doing everything myself, but it paid off. My marketing manager helped me implement strategies that took my brand to the next level, from targeted Facebook ads to influencer partnerships and collaborations with other brands. One of the most memorable moments in my journey was when my business was featured in a major magazine. I had been working with a small PR firm to help spread the word, but I never imagined it would result in such exposure. I remember seeing the article online and nearly falling off my chair. Sales spiked, and I gained hundreds of new customers almost overnight. That was when I realized that I had built something real. However, with success came its own set of problems. As the business grew, the number of orders increased exponentially. I had to set up a more efficient supply chain, find reliable fulfillment partners, and figure out how to manage inventory. At one point, I was so overwhelmed that I had to step back and reassess my strategy. I realized that if I wanted to keep growing, I needed to put more systems in place and hire a team that could help execute my vision. Hiring a team was one of the best decisions I made. I brought in a designer to help with the creative side of the business, a logistics expert to manage fulfillment, and an operations manager to streamline our processes. Having a team meant I could focus on the bigger picture, like developing new products and building partnerships. It also allowed me to finally take a step back and enjoy the fruits of my labor. As the years went on, I continued to grow the business. I started collaborating with other brands, launching exclusive limited edition collections, and expanding internationally. The industry I was in was competitive, but I believed in my brand and the community I had built. I made sure that every product I created was something I would personally wear and that it aligned with my values of sustainability and ethical production. Over time, the brand became known for its high-quality, custom-designed products and its commitment to making a positive impact on the world. But success wasn't without its setbacks. There were times when I made mistakes, like choosing the wrong suppliers or investing in marketing campaigns that didn't deliver the results I expected. I've learned that failure is a part of the process. What matters is how you bounce back and learn from it. Each setback taught me something new about the business, and it made me more resilient. Now, looking back on everything, I can't help but feel proud of what I've built. I went from being a college graduate with no job prospects to running a successful e-commerce business with a global customer base. I've been able to hire a team, create jobs, and give back to causes I care about. I'm living proof that you don't need a fancy degree or a ton of money to make it in business. You just need the drive, the willingness to learn, and the courage to take risks. Today, I'm not only the CEO of my company, but I also mentor aspiring entrepreneurs and share my journey with others. I'm constantly reminded of how far I've come, and I'm excited for what the future holds. My business is more than just a source of income. It's a platform for me to inspire others, create products that people love, and make a difference in the world. If there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. The road is full of ups and downs, but if you keep pushing forward, the rewards are worth it. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. It was the summer of 2015, and I found myself sitting in a tiny, cluttered apartment in downtown Los Angeles. My bank account was nearing zero, my phone bill was overdue, and I was having one of those moments where I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. I had left my stable job just 6 months prior to pursue what I thought was my big idea. Everyone around me, from family to friends, thought I was crazy. Why leave a perfectly good job in marketing to start something from scratch? The truth was, I didn't have the answer. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep playing it safe. I had spent most of my life following the traditional path: high school, college, a steady job. But in my heart, I knew I wanted something more. I wanted to create something of my own, something that would have a lasting impact. I had been passionate about fitness for as long as I could remember, and it was around that time I realized how much the fitness industry was lacking in quality and convenience for busy people like myself. There were gym memberships, but no one really had the time to commit to them. At-home workouts were scattered and inconsistent. Nutrition plans were either too complicated or simply not adaptable to people's hectic lifestyles. That's when I decided to create an app that would streamline fitness and wellness into a daily routine that anyone, regardless of their schedule, could fit into their life. The idea sounded simple enough, but I quickly learned that building an app wasn't like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. It was more like trying to assemble an entire house without a blueprint. The learning curve was steep. I didn't know the first thing about coding or app development, but I was determined to figure it out. I spent hours reading articles and watching YouTube tutorials. I reached out to freelance developers, but they were expensive, and I simply didn't have the money. Eventually, I found a local tech incubator that offered mentorship to entrepreneurs. I applied, and to my surprise, I was accepted. This was my first win, and I remember that moment like it was yesterday. I was introduced to my first mentor, Alex, a former software engineer turned entrepreneur. He took me under his wing, explaining the process of building an app step by step. The first thing he told me was to stop focusing on creating a perfect product. Build something small that works, he said. You can always iterate and improve. It was a lesson I didn't fully appreciate at the time, but it would become one of the most important lessons of my journey. In the beginning, everything felt like a struggle. I'd spend hours working on the app, only for it to crash or malfunction. Then there were the sleepless nights of writing business plans, reaching out to potential investors, and trying to find a way to make it all work. Every day was a roller coaster of excitement and despair. But as the months passed, I started to see progress. The app was starting to take shape, and more importantly, people were starting to take notice. I remember when we hit our first milestone. After months of hard work, we launched a beta version of the app to a small group of users. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People loved the simplicity and ease of use. They said it was exactly what they needed to stay on track with their fitness goals. I was ecstatic, but I knew this was just the beginning. From there, we launched a full version of the app, and the growth was slow but steady. I had no funding, no major investors backing me up, and no marketing budget to speak of. It was all word of mouth, social media, and a few small collaborations with fitness influencers who shared our vision. We didn't have the flashiest ads or the biggest budget, but what we did have was a product that solved a real problem for people. As time went on, I began to learn the importance of community. Building a brand wasn't just about making a product. It was about creating a group of people who felt like they were part of something bigger. I engaged with users on social media, responded to their feedback, and made them feel heard. They became our biggest advocates, and through them, the app started to grow exponentially. But, as with any business, the road wasn't always smooth. We faced plenty of setbacks along the way. There was a time when we almost ran out of money. We had a few months where our revenue dipped significantly, and I thought we might have to shut down. But I refused to give up. I did everything I could to keep the business afloat. I hustled harder than I ever had before, taking on freelance projects, working late into the night, and doing everything I could to make sure we stayed above water. One of the most challenging moments came when a competitor, a much larger company with deep pockets, launched a similar app, and they had the marketing muscle to back it. For a brief moment, I thought that maybe we were done for. But that's when I realized something. We weren't competing with them on the same level. We weren't trying to be the biggest. We were trying to be the best for a specific group of people. Our app was tailored for individuals who needed a more personalized, flexible approach to fitness. It was built on a foundation of genuine user feedback and real-life experiences. That's what set us apart. Over time, that focus on community, on the people who were actually using our product, paid off. The app started to gain serious traction. We began partnering with fitness brands and influencers, and our user base grew exponentially. Eventually, we secured our first round of investment, which allowed us to expand the team and build out more features. Now, 5 years later, the app has over 1 million active users. It's been featured in major publications, and we've even partnered with some of the biggest names in fitness. What started as an idea in a small apartment is now a thriving business that's making a real impact on people's lives. But the road to success wasn't a straight line. It was filled with uncertainty, self-doubt, and countless challenges. There were moments when I questioned whether it was worth it. But looking back now, I realized that the hardest moments were the ones that helped me grow the most. If I hadn't pushed through those dark times, I wouldn't be where I am today. I share this story not to brag, but to remind anyone who's in the trenches of entrepreneurship that it's not about being perfect. It's about being relentless. It's about finding your purpose, embracing the struggle, and trusting the process. The journey isn't easy, but if you're willing to put in the work and never give up, you can make your dreams a reality. To anyone out there thinking about taking the leap into entrepreneurship, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be one. Start now, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. Because failure isn't the end, it's just another step on the way to success. And that's exactly what I did. I started with nothing but an idea and the determination to make it work. Today, I look back and think, I made it through the hard times, and now it's paying off. So, to anyone out there feeling stuck or uncertain, keep pushing. You never know where your journey might take you. I never thought I'd end up being an entrepreneur. In fact, if you had asked me 5 years ago, I probably would have laughed and told you that I was just trying to get through each day at my boring desk job. I had always played by the rules, did what I was told, and never considered going off the beaten path. But sometimes life has a funny way of pushing you into things you never imagined. Let me take you back to the beginning. In 2016, I was a 28-year-old marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company. I had a decent salary, health benefits, and job security, but something was missing. I was stuck in a rut, doing the same thing every day, answering emails, attending meetings, working on campaigns that didn't really excite me. I spent my days thinking about how I wanted more freedom, more control, and more excitement. But every time I tried to plan something on the side, I'd quickly talk myself out of it. I wasn't one of those born entrepreneurs. I didn't have a business degree, I didn't know any successful entrepreneurs personally, and I had no money to invest. So, I kept working my 9 to 5, telling myself I was lucky to have a steady job in the first place. But in 2017, everything changed. It was one of those days when I got an email that made me question everything. It was a newsletter from a personal finance blog I subscribed to. The title caught my eye, How I Built a Six-Figure Business from Scratch. I remember sitting at my desk, clicking the link, and reading it in disbelief. The person behind the blog wasn't some Harvard-educated genius or an old money investor. They were just like me, a regular person who had started their own business with little money, no formal training, and a lot of hustle. It was a game changer for me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. If they could do it, why couldn't I? That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about this new world I had just discovered. This world where people could create businesses out of nothing and make them successful. It seemed so empowering. It seemed so possible. I decided then and there that I would start my own business. I had no idea what it would be, but I knew I needed to make it happen. The next day, I started brainstorming ideas. I had always loved cooking, and I noticed there was a huge trend toward healthy eating. People were always looking for new recipes, healthier snack options, and ways to eat clean without spending a ton of time in the kitchen. I had the idea to start a blog with simple, healthy recipes that could be made in under 30 minutes. The idea was to cater to busy professionals like myself who wanted to eat well, but didn't have hours to spend on meal prep. The concept was simple. I would share easy, quick recipes, and over time, I'd build an audience. I didn't know much about blogging, SEO, or social media at the time, but I started researching every free resource I could find. I taught myself how to set up a blog, how to take decent food photos with my iPhone, and how to write engaging posts. I spent evenings and weekends working on my blog while still holding down my full-time job. To my surprise, the blog started getting some traction. At first, it was small, just a few friends and family reading my posts. But within a few months, I started getting comments and messages from strangers. People were telling me how much they loved the recipes and how easy they were to follow. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me motivated. I was building something, and it felt incredible. In early 2018, I decided to take things a step further. I started an Instagram account for my blog and began sharing photos of the meals I had made. I quickly learned that good visuals were crucial for growing an online food brand, so I invested in some basic photography equipment. I practiced taking better photos of my dishes, and soon, my Instagram started to grow. I remember reaching 1,000 followers and thinking that was a huge milestone. Little did I know that it was just the beginning. By mid-2018, I was getting more attention on Instagram, and my blog traffic was steadily increasing. I also started monetizing my blog with affiliate links to kitchen tools and healthy products that I loved. The income was minimal at first, just enough to cover my hosting fees and a few small expenses, but it felt like a win. I remember the first time I made $100 in a month, just from affiliate links, and feeling like I had cracked the code. It wasn't much, but it was proof that my work was paying off. At this point, I knew I couldn't keep working full-time and running my side business. I was burning the candle at both ends. I had to make a decision. Either I kept working my 9 to 5 job and let my business fizzle out, or I took the risk and went all in on my blog. I took a deep breath and handed in my resignation. I was terrified. I had no steady income lined up. I had no guaranteed clients. But something inside me told me I had to take the leap. If I didn't, I would always wonder what if. The first year of being a full-time entrepreneur was a grind. I didn't have a fancy office, and I didn't have employees, just me, my laptop, and a growing list of tasks. There were days when I made mistakes, when I felt like I wasn't moving fast enough, or when I doubted my abilities. But every time I felt down, I remembered why I started. I was doing this to create something bigger than myself, something that could help people and give me the freedom I craved. In 2019, I took another big leap. I decided to launch my first paid product, an online course teaching people how to cook healthy meals in under 30 minutes. I spent months creating the content, filming videos, and setting up the sales pages. It was a huge risk. I had no idea how it would do. But when the course launched, it sold like hotcakes. I made over $5,000 in the first month, which was more than I had ever made in a single month at my corporate job. That success gave me the confidence to keep going. By 2020, my blog was generating steady income, and my social media following had grown exponentially. I expanded my offerings to include meal prep guides, ebooks, and one-on-one coaching for people who wanted more personalized support. I was finally living the dream I had once thought impossible, working for myself, helping people, and doing something I loved. Looking back on the journey, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many nights when I doubted myself, when I was scared, and when I thought I wouldn't make it. But the one thing I've learned is that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, patience, and a lot of hard work. The key is to keep pushing forward, even when it feels like you're not getting anywhere. Every failure is just a lesson, and every small win is a step closer to where you want to be. If there's one thing I can tell you from my experience, it's this. If you have an idea that excites you, take the leap. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect amount of money. Just start. Because once you do, you'll learn more than you ever thought possible. And eventually, that idea will turn into something real. I always thought that being an entrepreneur meant making a lot of money, working on big projects, and living a life full of freedom and success. But I was wrong. The journey to becoming an entrepreneur is not what they show you in the movies, and it's definitely not glamorous. It's long, difficult, and filled with moments where you question everything. This is my story of how I went from being a broke college student to running my own successful business, and the lessons I learned along the way. It all started when I was in my sophomore year of college. I was studying business, and like many others, I thought I had it all figured out. I'd read all the books, followed all the successful entrepreneurs on social media, and was ready to jump into the business world with both feet. But the reality of running a business wasn't something I was prepared for. At the time, I was living in a small, rundown apartment. My roommates were cool, but none of us had much money. I was always scrimping and saving just to afford the basics: food, rent, textbooks. One evening, while browsing social media, I saw an ad for a dropshipping course. You know the kind. One of those flashy ads promising financial freedom and living life on your terms. It was late, and I was tired, but I clicked it. For some reason, I thought this was the answer to all my problems. The course seemed simple enough. It was all about setting up an online store, choosing a product, running ads, and letting the money roll in. In my mind, I saw dollar signs everywhere. I can do this, I thought. So I used the little savings I had left to invest in the course. It was a risky decision, but I told myself that it would pay off. The next few weeks were spent in front of my laptop, watching countless videos and following step-by-step guides. I learned about e-commerce platforms, digital marketing, and how to find a winning product. I spent hours perfecting my website, choosing my niche, and writing product descriptions. It felt like I was finally getting somewhere. The first few sales I made were exciting. My heart raced when I saw that I'd actually sold something. But that excitement was short-lived. It didn't take long for the reality of running an online store to set in. I quickly realized that just because you set up a website and run some ads doesn't mean people will start throwing money at you. In fact, it felt like I was spending more money on ads than I was making in sales. At first, I blamed the products. Maybe they weren't trendy enough, or I had chosen the wrong suppliers. So I pivoted. I changed the products, tried new marketing strategies, and even paid for influencer promotions. But my sales didn't increase in any significant way. My profits were still far from what I had hoped for, and the ads I was running were eating up my budget faster than I could replenish it. I felt defeated. I started questioning my decision to drop everything and try this entrepreneurial dream. I was failing, and not just a little. I had invested my savings into this business, and I was watching it slip away. The thought of quitting crossed my mind more times than I care to admit. But there was something inside me that refused to give up. I knew that most businesses don't succeed overnight. The ones that do were usually the exception, not the rule. I started reaching out to other entrepreneurs in online forums, joining Facebook groups, and attending webinars to learn from those who had already made it. Through these conversations, I discovered something that completely shifted my perspective. The real success stories weren't the ones that had made millions in their first year. The successful entrepreneurs were the ones who kept going. They had failed, made mistakes, learned from them, and tried again. The path to success wasn't a straight line. It was full of bumps, detours, and even breakdowns. But those who kept moving forward were the ones who eventually made it. With this new mindset, I began to view my failures not as dead ends, but as learning experiences. I didn't give up. Instead, I doubled down on my efforts. I revamped my website, spent even more time researching customer behavior, and got more strategic with my ads. Slowly but surely, things began to improve. My sales still weren't huge, but they were steady. The money I made covered my costs, and I was even able to pay myself a small salary. As my business began to grow, so did my confidence. I realized that this was just the beginning. I started to scale my operations, hire a small team, and look for new opportunities. Along the way, I made plenty of mistakes. There were times when I hired the wrong people, launched products that didn't sell, or spent too much money on ads that didn't convert. But each mistake taught me something valuable. One of the most important lessons I learned was the importance of persistence. Building a business is like planting a tree. You don't just throw a seed in the ground and expect it to grow overnight. It takes time, care, and patience. There were days when I felt like nothing was working, but I kept pushing forward. The results eventually came, but it wasn't a smooth ride. Today, my business is thriving. It's not a multi-million-dollar company, but it's profitable, and it's growing. I'm able to support myself and my team, and we're constantly improving our products and services. More importantly, I've learned that success doesn't look like what you see on social media. It's not about the luxury cars, expensive vacations, or flashy lifestyles. True success is about resilience, learning from failure, and finding fulfillment in the work you do. Looking back, I realized that every failure, every setback, and every moment of doubt played a role in my journey. I wouldn't have made it this far if I hadn't failed so many times. The key to entrepreneurship isn't in avoiding failure. It's in embracing it, learning from it, and using it as a stepping stone to success. If I could go back and tell my younger self one thing, it would be this: don't be afraid of failure. It's not the end of the world. It's just the beginning of something greater. The road ahead won't be easy, but if you're willing to work hard, learn from your mistakes, and keep going, you'll get where you want to be. Entrepreneurship isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a long, difficult journey, but it's also the most rewarding thing I've ever done. This story is about how I went from a broke college dropout to running a successful startup that's now worth over $30 million. It wasn't easy, and there were many nights I wanted to quit, but I'm here to tell you that perseverance, timing, and a little bit of luck can really turn things around. I was always a big ideas kind of person. Growing up, I wanted to be a doctor, but when I hit high school, I realized I wasn't built for that kind of life. Chemistry and biology classes were a struggle for me, and I was quickly losing interest in the whole idea. So, I decided to drop out of college and follow my passion for business instead. I remember the exact moment I told my parents. I was sitting in the kitchen, nervously twisting my hands. They were disappointed, to say the least. My mom was heartbroken. She had always been a believer in education, and here I was telling her I was dropping out to chase some vague idea of entrepreneurship. My dad was more supportive, but he gave me the "you better have a plan" speech. At the time, I didn't have a plan, but I had a vision. I had always been fascinated by tech, and I knew that the future was heading toward online businesses. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that somehow, someway, I would build a company. So, I made a decision to figure things out as I went along. I moved into a small apartment with a couple of roommates, and I spent my days learning everything I could about entrepreneurship. I watched countless videos on YouTube, read books on startups, and subscribed to all the business podcasts I could find. But nothing really clicked for me until I stumbled across a podcast about SaaS, software as a service, businesses. It was a game changer. The more I listened, the more I realized that this was the way forward. The idea of recurring revenue from subscriptions was appealing, and I knew there was a huge opportunity in this space. The next step was coming up with an idea. I started brainstorming and looking for problems people were facing that I could solve. One day, while having a conversation with a friend, it hit me: business owners and marketers were struggling with creating high-quality content for their websites and social media accounts. It was an endless task, and most of the time, they didn't have the time or resources to create content consistently. That's when I realized there was an opportunity to create an AI-powered content generator that could help businesses automate the content creation process. I didn't have any coding experience, but that didn't stop me. I found a team of developers willing to work on the project, and we started working on the platform. The first version of the software was basic, very basic, but it worked. The idea was to let businesses input a few keywords, and the tool would generate blog posts, social media captions, and even product descriptions. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I'll admit, the first few months were incredibly tough. We weren't making any money, and I was spending most of my time trying to market the product. I had no funding, so everything came out of my own pocket. I wasn't able to pay myself, and I was barely able to pay the developers. There were days when I thought I should just cut my losses and get a real job. But every time I thought about quitting, I reminded myself that I had come too far to give up now. Eventually, things started to take off. The first customers came in slowly, and I started getting positive feedback from users. They were impressed by how easy the tool was to use and how much time it saved them. The word started to spread, and our user base began growing. But I knew that in order to scale the business, I needed to invest more into marketing and improve the product even further. I was lucky enough to get my first investor after about a year of running the business. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was enough to help me hire a small marketing team and improve the software. We started running Facebook ads, building relationships with influencers, and implementing SEO strategies to bring in more organic traffic. With the investment, we were able to launch the product on a larger scale. That's when things started moving quickly. We saw a dramatic increase in signups, and the company's growth really took off. But with growth came new challenges. Managing a team, customer support, and ensuring our servers could handle the traffic became a constant worry. I had to hire more people, implement better systems, and learn to delegate tasks. There were days when I felt overwhelmed and wondered if I was in over my head. But I kept reminding myself that I had to take things one step at a time. Fast forward to 3 years later. My business now has over 100,000 users, and we're generating several $1,000,000 in annual revenue. We've expanded to offer more products and services, including content marketing consulting and personalized training for businesses that want to optimize their content creation process. My team has grown, and we've built a solid company culture that encourages innovation and creativity. We've raised multiple rounds of funding, and things are looking better than ever. But despite the success, I still feel like I'm only getting started. There are still plenty of challenges to face, and I know that the world of tech and SaaS is constantly evolving. I'm always looking for new ways to improve our product, find new markets, and better serve our customers. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many times when I doubted myself, when I thought about giving up. But the one thing that kept me going was the belief that I was onto something big. It wasn't always easy, and there were plenty of nights when I was working into the early hours of the morning, but I'm glad I kept pushing forward. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone who's thinking about starting a business, it would be this: don't be afraid to fail. Failure is part of the journey, and it's through failure that you learn the most. Be patient with yourself, stay focused, and keep working toward your goals. Success won't happen overnight, but with hard work and perseverance, you can achieve things you never thought possible. My story starts in a small town in the Midwest. I grew up in a modest home where both my parents worked long hours just to make ends meet. I had always been taught that hard work and perseverance were the keys to success. As a kid, I never really saw the importance of money, but I did understand that without it, nothing worked the way it was supposed to. I wanted to be wealthy, but not for the reasons most people think. It wasn't about the flashy cars or big houses. It was about having control. Control over my life, my schedule, and, most importantly, my future. I was a regular high school student, a bit of a daydreamer, constantly thinking about ways to make money. I wasn't interested in following the usual path. While my peers obsessed over college applications and sports, I was buried in books about entrepreneurship. I used to sit in the library during free periods and read biographies of successful people. Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, Oprah, their stories fascinated me. They weren't born rich. They made themselves rich. That's what I wanted to do. After high school, instead of going to college like everyone else, I decided to start my own business. The idea came to me one night when I was talking to a friend who was struggling with finding a decent phone case. His frustration with the limited options in the market made me realize something. There was a gap in the market for customizable, high-quality phone accessories. I spent the next few weeks researching the phone case market. I discovered that the industry was filled with cheap, generic products that didn't cater to the growing demand for personalization. The more I looked into it, the more I realized that I could create a brand that would offer unique, customizable, high-quality phone cases. I didn't have any money to start, but I had a laptop, a credit card, and a strong belief in my idea. I borrowed $500 from my parents and used it to create a simple website. I found a local supplier who could provide the phone cases, and I designed a few samples. The website looked amateurish, but it was enough to get started. I knew that the quality of the product would speak for itself. The first month was a struggle. I sold exactly 3 phone cases. I remember sitting at my desk, feeling disheartened. I had put so much time and energy into the website, the designs, and the marketing. 3 phone cases. But then something clicked. I realized I had been focusing too much on the product and not enough on the marketing. People needed to know about my product. I needed to reach them where they were. I started running Facebook ads and using Instagram to showcase the designs. I also reached out to a few influencers who were into tech and fashion, offering them free phone cases in exchange for promoting my brand. Slowly but surely, orders started rolling in. By the end of the 3rd month, I had made my first $1,000 in sales. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a start. At that point, I knew I had to scale. I reinvested the money I made into better quality ads and started expanding my product line. I introduced new designs, from minimalistic to quirky, and offered a range of materials, from rubber to leather. I also started selling on platforms like Amazon and eBay, which opened up a whole new world of customers. One thing I didn't anticipate was how difficult it would be to manage the growth. I was a one-man operation, and fulfilling orders became a nightmare. I would spend late nights packaging phone cases, answering customer emails, and designing new products. But despite the growing pains, my sales kept increasing. By the end of the first year, I was making around $50,000 in revenue. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to quit my part-time job and focus on my business full-time. The next step was figuring out how to streamline my operations. I outsourced the production of my phone cases to a factory overseas, which allowed me to scale up even further. I also hired a small team of employees to help with customer service, marketing, and packaging. This freed up my time to focus on the bigger picture, like expanding my brand and creating new products. By the end of year 2, my business was making over $200,000 annually. I was able to move out of my parents' house and rent a small apartment in the city. Things were looking up, but I wasn't satisfied. I still wanted more. That's when I decided to expand into other tech accessories. I launched a line of wireless earbuds and portable chargers. It was a risky move because the market was already saturated with well-established brands, but I knew I could differentiate my products by offering superior quality and unique designs. To my surprise, the new products took off. Within 6 months, my business was generating over $500,000 in revenue. I was finally starting to see the fruits of my labor. But as my success grew, so did the challenges. I faced competition from bigger companies with more resources. I had to constantly innovate to stay ahead. I also started dealing with counterfeit versions of my products being sold online. That was a nightmare. I had to spend a significant amount of time and money to protect my intellectual property and fight against the knockoffs. Despite the challenges, I pushed forward. I kept reinvesting in my brand and improving the quality of my products. I also diversified my marketing strategy, moving beyond social media ads to influencer collaborations, email marketing, and even a YouTube channel. Today, my company is worth over $10 million. We have a full range of tech accessories, and our products are sold worldwide. I've hired a talented team, and we're now working on expanding into other areas of lifestyle products. It hasn't been an easy journey. There have been countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and failures along the way. But I've learned that the key to success isn't about having the perfect plan or the most money to start with. It's about taking action, adapting to change, and never giving up. When I look back at how far I've come, I can't help but feel proud. But I also know that the journey is far from over. There's always more to do, more to learn, and more to achieve. The real reward, for me, isn't the money or the fame. It's knowing that I created something from nothing and that my story might inspire someone else to chase their dreams, no matter how impossible they might seem. It's crazy to think about how a simple idea about phone cases turned into a multi-million-dollar business. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. Anything is possible if you're willing to put in the work and take the risks. If you're reading this and you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: just start. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it doesn't exist. Get out there, make mistakes, learn from them, and keep going. It won't be easy, but I promise it will be worth it. I used to think that entrepreneurship was just about having a great idea, but my journey taught me that it's about a lot more than that. It's about perseverance, timing, and sometimes even a bit of luck. My story starts about 7 years ago, when I was in my mid-20s, struggling to find my footing in the world. At the time, I was working a 9-to-5 job in a small tech company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. I had always been a bit of a dreamer, though, and I was constantly reading about successful entrepreneurs, people who had started from nothing and built empires. I wanted to be one of them, but I didn't know where to start. I had no huge ideas, no major capital, and no connections. All I had was a burning desire to create something of my own. One day, after work, I was chatting with my friend, Jake, over a few beers. We were talking about how frustrating it was that so many great ideas never made it past the brainstorming phase. That conversation sparked something in me. We started tossing around ideas, app concepts, tech gadgets, anything, and eventually landed on the idea of creating an app that could help small businesses manage their inventory more efficiently. At the time, inventory management was a nightmare for many small businesses. Most of the software out there was either too expensive or just didn't meet their needs. We both knew that there was a gap in the market, but we had no technical background. I had a marketing degree, and Jake had experience in sales. So, naturally, we decided to give it a shot. I took on the role of business development and marketing, while Jake started working on building the product, despite not being a developer himself. We were both learning as we went. The first few months were incredibly tough. We worked out of a small apartment, sometimes coding late into the night, and sometimes trying to come up with a name for the app. We hit roadblocks constantly. The first prototype was buggy and barely worked. The app would crash every time you tried to add an item to the inventory. But we kept pushing forward, testing it on friends and family, getting feedback, and slowly improving it. At the same time, we started researching how to build a business. We didn't know the first thing about raising capital, so we funded everything ourselves, scraping together what we could from our day jobs. There were countless nights where I would stay up late reading articles about startups, investment, and market trends, trying to absorb as much as I could. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the only way forward. Eventually, after months of hard work, we had a product we were somewhat proud of. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. We decided to launch it to a small group of local businesses to see if there was any interest. I remember the first time we got a real customer. It wasn't a huge sale or anything, but someone actually paid for our app. That was the moment I realized this could be something. But then came the real challenge, getting more customers. We didn't have the budget to run large ad campaigns, and our app was still rough around the edges. We relied heavily on word-of-mouth marketing. We asked local businesses to try the app, give us feedback, and share it with others. Slowly but surely, we started to gain traction. However, as we started getting more users, we also started facing bigger challenges. The app would crash more often as the user base grew. We didn't have enough server capacity, and our small team was getting overwhelmed. At one point, we had to make the difficult decision to temporarily pause new signups while we fixed the issues. I remember how painful it was to send out that message to potential customers, explaining that we were not ready for the growth we had gotten. But we knew it was the only way to make sure we could deliver a quality product. We hired a few part-time developers to help us improve the app, and after several months, we finally had a stable version. The growth started to pick up again. More businesses were signing on, and word of mouth was spreading. We eventually raised a small round of funding from an angel investor, which allowed us to hire a full-time development team and scale the business. Fast forward to 3 years later. Our app was now being used by hundreds of small businesses across the country, and we had a team of 10 employees. We had even started to think about expanding internationally. But just as things were looking up, disaster struck. One of our major competitors, a much larger company, launched a similar app with better features and a massive marketing budget. It felt like we had been hit with a ton of bricks. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. I spent hours poring over our app, trying to figure out how to make it better, but it seemed like we were always one step behind. I remember talking to Jake during one of our late-night strategy sessions, and he said something that changed my perspective. We're not trying to beat them at their own game. We have to do something different. We have to figure out what our real value is. That conversation led to a pivotal moment in our company's growth. Instead of trying to compete directly with the bigger company, we decided to focus on the one thing that set us apart: our deep understanding of small businesses. We started offering personalized customer service, helping businesses with their inventory management beyond just the app. We created a community for our users, where they could share tips, ask questions, and learn from each other. Slowly but surely, we started to carve out a niche for ourselves. It wasn't easy. There were many more sleepless nights, many more setbacks, and many more moments when I thought we wouldn't make it. But we didn't give up. We kept listening to our customers, improving our product, and building relationships. Today, the company I started with Jake is one of the leading inventory management solutions for small businesses. We have thousands of customers worldwide and a team of over 50 employees. We've expanded into other areas, like accounting and order management, and we're continuing to grow. I look back at where we started, two guys with no experience and a vague idea, and I'm amazed at how far we've come. The lessons I've learned along the way are invaluable. Entrepreneurship isn't about having a perfect idea from the start. It's about being willing to learn, adapt, and persevere. It's about the small wins and the big setbacks. And most importantly, it's about never giving up, even when it seems impossible. To anyone out there who's thinking about starting a business, my advice is simple: just start. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need a perfect product or a huge budget. You just need a vision, a plan, and the determination to keep going, no matter what. If you're willing to put in the work, you can make it happen. I never thought I would become an entrepreneur. Growing up, I had no role models in that space. My parents were both teachers, and the idea of starting a business never crossed my mind. But today, I run a successful e-commerce business, and I've learned that sometimes, life has a way of nudging you toward opportunities you never thought possible. It all started when I was in my mid-20s, fresh out of college with a degree in marketing. I landed a decent job at a digital marketing agency, and for a while, I was content. I had a steady paycheck, great colleagues, and I was learning a lot. But deep down, I always felt like something was missing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was destined for something more. I watched friends and family members complain about their 9 to 5 jobs, and I realized that I didn't want to be stuck in the corporate grind forever. I wanted to build something of my own. The idea for my business came out of nowhere. One weekend, I was browsing Instagram and stumbled upon a post about a unique, handcrafted product. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, just a simple home decor item. But the way the creator marketed it caught my attention. The product was positioned as exclusive and luxurious, even though it was relatively inexpensive to make. I thought to myself, I could do that. I could create something people want, something they feel they need. At first, I didn't know what that something would be. I spent weeks brainstorming and researching different markets. I tried looking into creating a clothing brand, a tech accessory line, and even a fitness product, but none of those ideas stuck. I realized that what I needed to focus on was something I was passionate about, a product that would be personal to me. One day, I was cleaning out my closet when I came across an old leather bag I had bought in college. It was worn, scratched, and had a lot of character. I loved it because it had a story, and I had carried it everywhere for years. That's when it hit me. What if I could create high-quality, customizable leather goods, bags, wallets, belts, something people could own for a lifetime? I spent the next few months learning everything I could about leather crafting. I watched YouTube tutorials, read articles, and connected with local artisans. I didn't have any background in manufacturing or design, so this was completely new territory for me. I started small, experimenting with different types of leather and tools. My first few products were terrible. The stitching was uneven, the leather was rough, and the overall quality was subpar. But each time I made a mistake, I learned something valuable. I was determined to get it right. After 6 months of trial and error, I finally had a product I was proud of. I decided to take the plunge and launch my brand. The problem was, I didn't have a huge budget. I couldn't afford fancy marketing campaigns or hire a team of professionals. So, I did what any resourceful entrepreneur would do. I started small and used the power of social media to my advantage. I opened an Instagram account and started posting pictures of my products. I used hashtags, reached out to influencers, and even sent free samples to a few people with large followings in exchange for honest reviews. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of days when I felt like no one was paying attention. But slowly, the brand started to gain traction. People loved the quality and craftsmanship of my products, and word began to spread. I was getting orders, but it wasn't enough to quit my day job just yet. After about a year of side hustling, I realized that my business had potential to grow faster if I could dedicate more time to it. So, I made the decision to quit my full-time job and go all in. I was terrified. I had no steady paycheck anymore, and I was now fully responsible for my success or failure. But I felt like I had no choice. I couldn't continue to divide my time between a job I wasn't passionate about and a business I truly believed in. That decision to quit was one of the scariest things I've ever done. I was living paycheck to paycheck, and I had just enough savings to last me a few months. But it was also the best decision I ever made. I dove headfirst into the business and started making bigger moves. I expanded my product line, partnered with suppliers to reduce costs, and began investing in paid ads. The growth was slow at first, but I kept pushing forward. About 6 months after quitting my job, my business started generating enough revenue to sustain itself. I was finally able to hire a small team to help with production and customer service, which was a huge relief. With the extra help, I was able to focus on the areas that needed more attention, like improving the website and creating more engaging content for our social media channels. Then came the game changer, a feature in a popular lifestyle magazine. I couldn't believe it. I was sitting at my desk, checking emails when I saw an email from the magazine editor. They had seen my brand on Instagram and wanted to feature us in an upcoming article. I was ecstatic. The feature went live, and overnight, I saw a massive spike in traffic and sales. It was the kind of exposure I had been dreaming about, but I wasn't prepared for it. I scrambled to keep up with the influx of orders, and my small team worked overtime to fulfill everything. That feature catapulted my business to the next level. I started receiving more media attention, and orders were pouring in faster than we could handle. I invested in new machinery to speed up production, and I began shipping internationally. Within 2 years of going full-time, my business had grown into a 7-figure company. Today, my brand is known for its high-quality, handmade leather goods that are designed to last a lifetime. We've expanded into new product categories like watches and custom engravings, and we have a dedicated following of loyal customers. The best part is that I've been able to create something that I'm proud of, a company that not only produces beautiful products, but also offers great jobs and benefits to my employees. Looking back, I realized that the journey wasn't easy. There were countless sleepless nights, financial struggles, and moments of doubt. But it's been worth it. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that taking risks, staying focused, and being persistent can lead to incredible outcomes. I'm proud of what I've built, and I'm excited to see where it goes next. If you're out there, feeling uncertain about your own entrepreneurial journey, just know this. The hardest part is often the beginning. Keep pushing forward, and don't be afraid to take that leap. It all started back in 2015 when I decided to leave my comfortable, yet stifling, 9-to-5 job. I was working as a project manager at a mid-sized tech company, making a decent salary and living a fairly predictable life. But something was missing. I had this nagging feeling in my chest that I wasn't meant for the corporate world. The idea of working on someone else's vision, contributing to projects that weren't really mine, was slowly suffocating me. My passion for technology, problem-solving, and the desire to create something truly meaningful kept gnawing at me, until one day, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I started doing what most people do when they want to escape their job. I began working on side projects during my free time. At first, it was just a way to pass the time. I built small apps, tinkered with websites, and tried learning new skills. I didn't expect much from it. It was more about finding a distraction from my day-to-day routine. But slowly, I began to realize that these small projects were something I could actually monetize. The more I learned, the more excited I got. There was something magical about creating something from scratch and seeing it come to life, especially when I was doing it on my own terms. One of the side projects that turned out to be more successful than I imagined was an app one created to help people organize their daily tasks. It was a simple concept, something like a to-do list app, but with a twist. I integrated gamification into it. The idea was to make task completion feel like a game, so people would stay motivated to finish their daily to-dos. I spent months perfecting the app in my spare time, coding and refining it in the evenings after work. After launching the app, I didn't expect it to take off immediately. It was a side project, after all. But then, something unexpected happened. It started gaining traction. At first, it was just a trickle, 1 or 2 downloads a day. But then, the word started to spread. The app's ratings were high, and users were leaving positive reviews. I was thrilled. It was the first taste of success I had ever felt in my own venture. I realized that this app had the potential to turn into something bigger, maybe even a full-time business. I started putting more effort into it, upgrading the app's features, improving its UI/UX, and launching marketing campaigns on social media. The more I worked on it, the more I started to see patterns in the types of users who were downloading the app. They were mostly young professionals, people just like me, trying to juggle busy lives and stay on top of their personal and professional tasks. It became clear that I was onto something. I wanted to make this more than just an app. I wanted to build a brand. Around this time, I faced a big decision. Do I quit my day job and go all in on the app? Or do I keep going in the corporate world while I work on it part-time? The fear of leaving my stable income behind was overwhelming. I had a lot to lose. But I also knew that the longer I stayed in my comfort zone, the longer it would take for me to realize my dreams. So, after much deliberation, I made the leap. I handed in my resignation letter and went full-time with my app. The transition was harder than I had imagined. Suddenly, I was responsible for everything: product development, marketing, finances, customer support. I had to learn everything the hard way. The first few months were rocky. The app's growth stagnated, and I started to question if I had made the right choice. There were sleepless nights where I doubted my decision, but I didn't give up. Instead, I kept iterating. I reached out to users, listened to their feedback, and made improvements. One of the turning points came when I decided to pivot slightly. I realized that the app's initial concept was solid, but there were other features I could add to make it even more valuable. I added integrations with popular productivity tools like Google Calendar and Slack. I created a premium version of the app with advanced features like analytics and team collaboration tools. The response was overwhelmingly positive. As the app continued to grow, I started hiring a small team to help with development and marketing. It was a huge relief to have people to share the workload with. With their help, I was able to expand the app's reach, launching it on new platforms and running targeted ad campaigns. The growth was exponential, and within a year, we had tens of thousands of active users. That's when the first major offer came in. A larger tech company, one that I had admired for years, reached out with an acquisition offer. They had been following the app's success and saw its potential to fit into their existing ecosystem. The offer was more than generous, it was life-changing. But I wasn't ready to sell. My gut told me that there was more I could do with this app. I wanted to keep building, keep expanding. So, I politely declined the offer. As the years went on, my app became a go-to solution for productivity enthusiasts. We added new features, built a strong user community, and continued to grow the brand. The most rewarding part of the journey was the feedback we received from users who told us how much the app had helped them. It wasn't just about creating a business, it was about making a real impact on people's lives. That's what kept me motivated. By 2020, the app was profitable, and I had the option to start scaling it further or exploring new ventures. That's when I decided to diversify. I took a portion of the revenue from the app and invested it into a few startups I believed in. Some of those startups failed, but a few became incredibly successful, bringing in additional revenue streams. My portfolio started to grow, and I eventually got into angel investing, mentoring young entrepreneurs who were in the same position I had been years earlier. Looking back, it's crazy to think how far I've come. What started as a small side project has turned into a thriving business. I often think about how different my life would be if I had stayed at that tech company, playing it safe and never taking the leap. I've learned so much along the way, not just about business, but about resilience, risk-taking, and the importance of following your instincts. Today, I'm still running my app, but I'm also exploring new opportunities. I've found that entrepreneurship is a never-ending journey. There's always something new to learn, and you're constantly evolving. It's not always glamorous, but the rewards, both personal and professional, are worth it. If you're reading this and you're thinking about making the leap, here's my advice: do it. Take the risk. Yes, it's scary, and yes, it's hard, but it's also the most fulfilling thing you'll ever do. You'll fail, but you'll learn. And when you succeed, it will feel like nothing else in the world. I'm still on this journey, and I don't know what the future holds, but I'm excited to find out. Whatever happens, I know I'll never regret taking that first step. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.